The bridge of the Velothi diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge hummed with quiet efficiency. Ambassador Kale stood before the main viewing screen, his forearms crossed behind his back as he studied the data, scrolling across multiple displays. The information about the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel made for interesting reading. Humans, they called themselves. A primitive species from a small blue planet in what they designated as the Sol system. According to the intelligence reports gathered by long-range scouts, these creatures had barely mastered basic space travel. Their longest journey had taken them only as far as their neighboring planets. Most concerning of all, they were still engaged in active warfare on their homeworld. Curious, Kale muttered to his aide, a younger Velothi named Thon. They developed interstellar travel while still fighting among themselves. Most unusual. Thon nodded, his large eyes reflecting the blue light from the screens. The Council finds it deeply troubling, Ambassador. A species that has not learned peace before reaching the stars could be quite dangerous. Kale turned away from the displays and walked toward his command chair. The Harmony's Edge was accompanied by 11 other Velothi warships, each one massive and gleaming with polished metal hulls. The fleet represented enough firepower to pacify a dozen worlds, though Kale hoped such force would not be necessary. The Galactic Accord was clear about new species. They must be integrated peacefully into galactic civilization for the good of all. Perhaps they simply need guidance, Kyle said, as he settled into his chair. We have successfully integrated 47 species over the past 3,000 years. These humans will be no different. The main screen shifted to show a small vessel approaching their position. It was crude by galactic standards, with angular lines and visible weapon mounts. The human ship looked more like a tool of war than a vessel of exploration. Its hull bore markings in the human language that the translation computers identified as New Sol. Incoming transmission from the human vessel, reported the communications officer. Put it through, Kale ordered. The screen flickered and revealed the interior of the human ship's bridge. A young human male sat in the captain's chair, wearing a dark blue uniform with golden insignia. His features were what the reports had described as typical for the Asian ethnic group of humans. Short black hair, dark eyes, and a calm expression that seemed oddly confident for someone facing 12 alien warships. This is Captain Lee Minho of the Earth exploration vessel New Sol, the human said in clear, measured tones. We received your transmission requesting that we stop and prepare to be boarded. May I ask the nature of your business? Kale smiled, a gesture that humans might find unsettling given his shark-like teeth, but one intended to convey friendliness. Captain Lee Minho, I am Ambassador Kale of the Velothi Coalition. We represent the Galactic Council and welcome you to the greater community of intelligent species. Thank you for the welcome, Lee Minho replied politely. However, we did not request boarding or assistance. We are conducting a peaceful scientific mission in what we consider to be neutral space. The humans' response puzzled Kyle. Most new species were eager to learn about galactic civilization once they understood its benefits. Captain, I fear there has been a misunderstanding. Under Galactic Accord 847b, all newly spacefaring species must undergo a peaceful integration process. This involves temporary custody of your vessel and crew while we evaluate your species' readiness to join the galactic community. Lee Minho's expression did not change, but something shifted in his dark eyes. Ambassador Kale, with respect, we have never agreed to any galactic accords. Humanity does not recognize the authority of any organization we did not choose to join. We will continue our mission as planned. Silence filled the bridge of the Harmony's Edge. Thon looked shocked, his large eyes wider than usual. The other bridge crew members exchanged glances. In 3,000 years of contact with new species, none had ever refused integration. Kyle felt his patience beginning to strain. Captain, perhaps you do not understand the situation. We represent the combined authority of 47 spacefaring civilizations. The integration process exists for the safety and benefit of all species, including your own. I understand perfectly, Ambassador, Lee Minho said calmly. You are demanding that we surrender our ship and crew to an authority we have never recognized. The answer is no. The human captain reached forward and ended the transmission. Kale stared at the blank screen for several long moments. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders. Finally, he turned to his weapons officer. Target their engines and weapons systems. Disable only. We want them intact for questioning. Yes, Ambassador. The Velothi fleet opened fire with precise controlled bursts of energy. The weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy, following standard protocols for dealing with resistant new species. The human ship's shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the incoming energy, but they were primitive by galactic standards. Within minutes, the shield generators overloaded and failed. Kale expected the humans to surrender immediately. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The new Soul suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the Harmony's edge. Its engines glowed white-hot as the human captain pushed them far beyond their safe operating limits. Sparks and flames could be seen through the viewports as systems overloaded throughout the ship. What are they doing? Thawne gasped. Kale watched in growing horror as the human vessel continued its suicide run. At the last moment, Lee Minho's face reappeared on the main screen. Behind him, his bridge was filled with smoke and sparks. Alarms wailed in the background. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the New Soul," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I am transmitting all tactical data about your fleet to Earth Command. Tell your council that they made a mistake today. They underestimated us." The transmission cut just as the New Soul struck the Harmony's edge. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the Velothi flagship as hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. The human ship, already critically damaged, broke apart on impact. There were no survivors. Kale pulled himself up from the deck where the collision had thrown him. Around him, his crew worked frantically to contain the damage. 3 decks of the Harmony's edge had been compromised, and dozens of his people were injured or dead. "Status report," he ordered, his voice shaking slightly. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9, reported his damage control officer. "We have lost primary power to the forward weapons array. Casualty reports are still coming in, but preliminary numbers suggest 43 dead and over 100 wounded." Kale slumped into his damaged command chair. In all his years as a diplomat, he had never encountered anything like this. The human captain had chosen death rather than surrender, and in doing so had inflicted more damage on a coalition fleet than any hostile action in recent memory. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of the Sol system. Multiple ships emerging from hyperspace." Kale felt a chill run through his body. He had assumed that destroying one primitive human ship would end any potential resistance from their species. Instead, it appeared that Captain Lee Minho's final transmission had accomplished exactly what he intended. The humans were coming, and Kale had the sinking feeling that the Galactic Council had severely miscalculated the nature of this new species. A species that chose death before surrender might prove to be unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The Velothi fleet quickly formed defensive positions, but Kale could not shake the image of Captain Lee Minho's calm face in those final moments. The human had not looked afraid or desperate. He had looked determined. That determination, Kale realized, might be the most dangerous thing of all. 3 days had passed since the destruction of the New Soul, and Ambassador Kale stood on the repaired bridge of the Harmony's edge, studying the damage reports from the collision. The human ship had been small and primitive, yet it had crippled his flagship and killed dozens of his crew. The memory of Captain Lee Minho's calm face haunted him. "Ambassador," called his sensor operator, "we are detecting massive energy signatures from the Sol system." Kale turned toward the main display, expecting to see perhaps a small evacuation fleet or a hastily assembled group of defensive vessels. What appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. Hundreds of ships were emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. The vessels were larger than the New Soul, their hulls dark and angular with weapon ports clearly visible along their sides. Each ship moved with mechanical precision, forming attack formations that spoke of military discipline and professional training. "How many?" Kale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sensors are still counting, sir. Current estimate is 312 vessels, with more still arriving." Kale felt his legs grow weak. The coalition fleet that had come to integrate the humans consisted of 12 ships, considered more than adequate for dealing with a primitive species. Now he faced a force more than 25 times larger. "Open communications," he ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of what was clearly the human flagship. A middle-aged human male sat in the command chair, his uniform crisp and his expression completely emotionless. Behind him, Dozens of crew members worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. "This is Fleet Admiral Kim Tae-hyun of the Earth Defense Force," the human said without preamble. "You have attacked and destroyed one of our vessels in unprovoked aggression. You killed Captain Lee Min-ho and his entire crew. We are here to respond." Kale struggled to find words. "Admiral Kim, surely we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. The incident with your ship was a misunderstanding. We can arrange compensation and formal apologies." Kim Tae-hyun's expression did not change. "There is nothing to discuss. You attacked our people. Now we respond." The transmission ended abruptly, and Kale watched in horror as the human fleet began to advance. Their formation was unlike anything he had ever seen in galactic warfare. Instead of the orderly lines and predictable patterns used by civilized species, the humans moved in complex three-dimensional formations that seemed to shift and flow like living things. All ships. "Defensive positions," Kale ordered over the fleet communication system. "Prepare for engagement." The Velothi fleet formed the standard battle line, each ship taking position according to centuries of military doctrine. Their weapons were powerful and their shields strong. Kale told himself that 12 experienced warships could hold their own against primitive human technology, regardless of numbers. He was wrong. The human attack came from multiple directions simultaneously. Fighter craft that had been hidden among the larger ships suddenly appeared, moving with impossible speed and agility. They dove through the Velothi formation like angry insects, their weapons firing in coordinated strikes that overwhelmed individual ship defenses. Commander Yu Ha-jin led Alpha Squadron in her fighter, weaving between the massive alien vessels with practiced ease. Her squadmates followed her lead, using tactics that would have been impossible in atmosphere, but which worked perfectly in the three-dimensional battlefield of space. "Target their sensor arrays first," she transmitted to her pilots. "Blind them before they can coordinate their response." The human fighters struck with surgical precision. Where galactic warfare typically involved prolonged exchanges of fire between capital ships, the humans used swarm tactics and hit-and-run attacks that left the Velothi commanders struggling to respond. Aboard the Harmony's Edge, Kale watched his carefully planned defensive formation fall apart within minutes. The humans did not fight like any species he had encountered. They seemed to treat space combat like aerial warfare, using speed and maneuverability instead of the traditional exchange of heavy weapons fire. "Sir, the Vigilant has lost main power," reported his communications officer. "The Stellar Dawn is reporting critical damage to their weapon systems." Before Kale could respond, proximity alarms began screaming throughout the bridge. A human destroyer had broken through their defensive line and was heading directly for the Harmony's Edge. "Evasive maneuvers," Kyle ordered. But the Velothi flagship was too large and slow to avoid the incoming attack. The human ship opened fire with weapons that seemed primitive by galactic standards, but which were used with devastating effectiveness. The destroyer's captain, Commander Park Jin-ho, had studied the alien ship designs captured from long-range reconnaissance. He knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. His weapons targeted the Harmony's Edge's main power conduits and shield generators, systems that other galactic species typically avoided in order to preserve the possibility of surrender. Humans, Park Jin-ho had learned from years of warfare on Earth, did not fight to accept surrender. They fought to win completely. The Harmony's Edge shuddered under the assault as system after system failed. Emergency lighting flickered on throughout the bridge as main power died. Through the chaos, Kale could hear damage reports flooding in from throughout the fleet. "The Bright Star has been destroyed," his communications officer reported with shock in his voice. "The Golden Wing is venting atmosphere. The Star Rider is requesting permission to surrender." Kyle stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than 30 minutes, his fleet had been reduced to scattered, damaged vessels. The humans continued their attack with methodical precision, showing no signs of fatigue or mercy. What terrified him most was their apparent disregard for their own casualties. Human ships that took critical damage did not retreat for repairs as any sensible captain would do. Instead, they accelerated toward the nearest Velothi vessel, using their dying ships as weapons. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "we are receiving surrender requests from 7 of our remaining vessels. The humans are not responding to our attempts to communicate terms." Through the main view screen, Kyle could see human fighters continuing their attacks on already disabled Velati ships. There was no pause for negotiation, no opportunity for surrender. The humans fought with a single-minded determination that ignored all conventional rules of warfare. Admiral Kim Tae-hyun observed the battle from his command ship with the same calm expression he had worn during the initial communication. Around him, his staff coordinated the attack with professional efficiency. There was no celebration, no excitement. This was simply work that needed to be done. "Status report," he requested. 11 alien vessels disabled or destroyed, reported his tactical officer. 1 enemy ship attempting to flee. "Our casualties are minimal. 7 fighters lost, 1 destroyer with heavy damage." Kim Tae-hyun nodded. "Pursue the fleeing vessel. Take prisoners if possible. We need information about their government and military structure." As the last Velati ship was captured, Kyle found himself in a detention cell aboard a human vessel, struggling to understand what had happened. The humans had not fought like any civilized species. They had waged war with the same intensity he had observed in nature documentaries about predator animals. The realization struck him like a physical blow. These humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were something new and dangerous, something that had learned to fight not for territory or resources, but for survival itself. In the galaxy's long history of peaceful integration and civilized warfare, humanity represented something unprecedented. They fought like their very existence depended on victory, because in their experience it always had. Colonel Ojiwan moved through the corridors of the captured Velati cruiser with her assault team, their magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor in perfect rhythm. The alien ship was larger than any human vessel, with wide passages and high ceilings designed for creatures taller than humans. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows as the team advanced toward the bridge. "Contact ahead," whispered Sergeant Kim Min-jae through the comm system. 4 aliens armed but not in defensive positions. Ojiwan raised her hand, bringing the team to a halt. Through her helmet display, she could see the thermal signatures of the Velati crew members around the corner. They were standing in the open, their weapons lowered. It was behavior that made no sense from a tactical perspective. "This is Colonel Ojiwan of the Earth Defense Force," she announced, her voice amplified by her suit's external speakers. "You are ordered to lay down your weapons and surrender immediately." The response came in heavily accented but understandable human language. "We surrender. Please do not harm us. We are not combat personnel." Ojiwan exchanged glances with her team members. In her 15 years of military service, including conflicts in the Korean Peninsula and the African Resource Wars, she had never encountered enemy combatants who surrendered so readily. Most human military engagements involved fierce resistance until the very end. The team rounded the corner to find 4 Velati crew members kneeling on the deck, their weapons placed carefully beside them. They were tall and thin with 4 arms and large eyes that reflected the emergency lighting. Their body language spoke of genuine terror. "Secure the weapons," Ojiwan ordered. As her team collected the alien firearms, she studied the surrendered crew. "Are there any other armed personnel aboard this vessel?" "No," replied the apparent leader, a Velati with darker skin coloring. "The security team abandoned their posts when your ships began boarding. We are engineers and technicians only." Ojiwan felt a mixture of confusion and disgust. The idea of security personnel abandoning their posts was completely foreign to human military thinking. Even in hopeless situations, human soldiers typically fought to the end or died trying to protect their comrades. "Take them to holding area 3, she instructed her team. "I want a complete sweep of this vessel. Check every compartment and secure all data storage devices." As her soldiers escorted the prisoners away, Ojiwan continued toward the bridge. The ease of the capture troubled her. Human military doctrine assumed that any boarding action would involve fierce corridor-to-corridor fighting. These aliens had simply given up the moment armed humans appeared on their ship. The bridge of the Velati cruiser was a marvel of advanced technology. Holographic displays showed star charts and technical readouts that were clearly superior to human equivalents. Yet the crew had abandoned all of this without firing a single shot in its defense. Major Choi Sung-hyun was already at work downloading data from the main computer systems when Ojiwan arrived. His technical team had connected portable human computers to the alien systems and were rapidly copying terabytes of information. "What are you finding?" she asked. Choi Seung-yun looked up from his work with an expression of amazement. Colonel, these aliens have technology that is centuries ahead of ours in some areas. Their power systems, their computers, their materials science. It is all far more advanced than anything we have developed. OG-1 studied the alien control panels with their elegant interfaces and sophisticated design. Then why did they lose so badly? That is the interesting question, Choi replied. I have been analyzing their tactical databases and fleet coordination protocols. Their entire approach to warfare is based on minimizing casualties and achieving victory through superior technology and positioning. He pulled up a holographic display showing battle formations used by various galactic species. The patterns were beautiful and symmetrical, like dances performed in space. Look at this, Colonel. These are standard attack formations used by the Galactic Coalition. They are designed to demonstrate superior force while providing multiple opportunities for the enemy to surrender. OG-1 studied the formations with a professional eye. They are predictable. Any human military academy student could counter these tactics within hours of seeing them. Exactly. And here is the most important discovery. Choi activated another display showing casualty statistics from galactic conflicts over the past 1,000 years. In all that time, the total number of deaths from warfare between spacefaring species is less than died in the Battle of Seoul during our own Korean War. The numbers were staggering in their smallness. Galactic warfare, it appeared, was more like a formal game than actual combat. Species fought until one side acknowledged defeat, usually after minimal losses. The concept of fighting to the death was completely foreign to galactic civilization. Dr. Lim Yunji, the fleet's xenopsychologist, arrived on the bridge as Choi finished his presentation. She had been interrogating the captured Velothi crew, and her findings supported the technical analysis. Colonel, she began, I have interviewed 12 prisoners from this vessel. Their responses are consistent and deeply troubling. These aliens have never experienced what we would consider real warfare. She activated her own holographic display showing psychological profiles of the prisoners. Every galactic species achieved interstellar flight only after achieving global peace on their homeworlds. They had already eliminated war as a means of resolving conflicts before they reached space. OG-1 felt a chill run through her as she understood the implications. They have no concept of total war. None whatsoever, Dr. Lim confirmed. When I asked them about fighting to the death or sacrificing lives for strategic advantage, they reacted with horror. The idea of using suicide attacks or accepting massive casualties for victory is completely alien to their thinking. Major Choi pulled up another display showing human military history. Colonel, we developed spaceflight while still fighting the Afghanistan conflict, the South China Sea War, and dozens of smaller engagements. We reached the stars carrying the knowledge of 5,000 years of continuous warfare. The bridge fell silent as the three officers contemplated what they had learned. Humanity had entered a galaxy where war was a ritualized affair between civilized species who had forgotten how to truly fight. The humans, with their primitive technology but advanced understanding of warfare, represented something unprecedented. There is more, Dr. Lim continued. The prisoners tell me that news of our victory has already spread through galactic communication networks. Other species are viewing footage of our attack with the same horror that we might watch a plague outbreak. OG-1 walked to the main view screen, which showed the human fleet regrouping after their victory. Earth Defense Force vessels moved with the purposeful efficiency of a military organization that expected to fight again soon. The contrast with the elegant but helpless alien ships was stark. They see us as monsters, she said quietly. Perhaps, Dr. Lim replied, but their own prisoners have told me something even more significant. They are also impressed by our effectiveness. Several alien species have already begun requesting information about human military techniques. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just won a single battle. They had demonstrated to an entire galaxy that there was an alternative to ritualized warfare. The knowledge that total victory was possible might spread to other species, fundamentally changing galactic civilization. We need to get this information back to Earth Command immediately, OG-1 decided. Our leaders need to understand what we are dealing with. This is not just first contact with alien species. We have accidentally started a revolution in how galactic warfare is conducted. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth with their prisoners and captured technology, None of them fully understood the magnitude of what had been set in motion. They had won a battle through superior tactics and willingness to accept casualties. In doing so, they had introduced concepts to the galaxy that would forever change the balance of power among the stars. The age of civilized warfare was ending, and humanity had fired the first shot in a new kind of conflict that would reshape the entire galaxy. The emergency session of the Hegemony Council convened in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, a massive space station that served as the political center of galactic civilization. Representatives from 15 major species gathered around the circular chamber, their various forms and sizes creating a rainbow of alien diversity. The mood was darker than any gathering in recorded galactic history. High Counselor Vex of the Altarian Republic called the session to order, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights as he spoke. We face an unprecedented crisis. The reports from the Velothi encounter with the humans have been confirmed. These new beings wage war in ways that violate every principle of civilized conduct. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The holographic display showed footage from the Battle of Harmony's Edge, including the shocking moment when Captain Lee Minho deliberately rammed his ship into the Velothi flagship. To species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of bloodless conflict resolution, the images were deeply disturbing. The humans killed over 300 Coalition personnel in a single engagement, continued Counselor Vex. They showed no mercy to surrendering vessels and used tactics that can only be described as barbaric. Worse still, intelligence reports suggest they are mobilizing their entire civilization for expanded military operations. Ambassador Kyle, still recovering from his injuries, stood to address the council. His forearms were supported by medical braces, and his voice carried the weight of recent trauma. Honored counselors, I must stress that these humans are unlike any species we have previously encountered. They do not fight for territory or resources. They fight for survival itself, and they will pay any price for victory. The Hegemony Council had governed galactic civilization for over 8,000 years through a combination of advanced technology and sophisticated diplomacy. War, when it occurred, was conducted according to strict rules that minimized casualties and preserved civilian populations. The human approach to warfare threatened to destroy this entire system. Counselor Thera of the Centauri Federation, her serpentine form coiled in her speaking position, addressed the assembly. The question before us is clear. Do we allow this war madness to spread throughout the galaxy, or do we take decisive action to contain it? What kind of action? Asked Counselor Dran of the Outer Rim territories. Sterilization, Thara replied without hesitation. Complete elimination of the human homeworld and all their colonies before their military philosophy can contaminate other species. The chamber fell silent. In 8,000 years of galactic governance, the Hegemony Council had never authorized the complete destruction of an intelligent species. The concept was so extreme that many council members had difficulty processing it. Meanwhile, in deep space near the edge of human territory, Captain Bei Su-young commanded the reconnaissance vessel Swift Current as it monitored coalition communication networks. Her ship was one of 12 intelligence-gathering platforms deployed throughout the sector. Using captured alien technology to intercept enemy transmissions, Captain, called her communications officer, we are receiving massive data bursts from the direction of Nexus Prime. The encryption is beyond our current capabilities, but the volume suggests major military planning. Bei Su-young studied the readouts on her command screen. The humans had learned enough about galactic technology to recognize the signs of large-scale coordination. Something big was being planned, and it was directed at Earth. Get me a secure channel to Fleet Command, she ordered. Priority Alpha classification. The transmission reached Earth Defense Headquarters within hours, where General Nam Wu-jin reviewed the intelligence reports with growing concern. His staff had been analyzing captured alien databases, and the picture they painted was disturbing. The galaxy possessed military resources that dwarfed human capabilities by orders of magnitude. Sir, reported his intelligence chief, Colonel Park Kyung-hee, our analysis suggests the aliens are assembling the largest military force in galactic history. Current estimates place the fleet size at over 2,000 vessels representing multiple species. General Nam studied the tactical projections on his command table. Even with their superior military doctrine, Human forces would be overwhelmed by such numbers. The Earth Defense Force possessed fewer than 400 combat-capable ships, many of which were converted civilian vessels. Options? He asked his staff. We could attempt diplomatic contact, suggested Admiral Lee Donghae. Perhaps we can negotiate some form of peaceful resolution. Nam shook his head. Intelligence reports indicate they are planning complete sterilization of Earth and our colonies. There will be no negotiation. The room fell silent as the officers contemplated the implications. Humanity faced extinction at the hands of an enemy that possessed vastly superior technology and numbers. Conventional defensive strategies would only delay the inevitable. There is another option, Nam said quietly. Preemptive strike. The suggestion sent shockwaves through his staff. A preemptive attack would mean striking first at targets throughout galactic space, using Earth's limited military resources in an offensive campaign that would determine the fate of humanity. Sir, Admiral Lee protested, our intelligence indicates they are assembling at multiple staging areas across hundreds of light years. We lack the resources to attack them all. We do not need to attack them all, Nam replied. We need to disrupt their coordination and demonstrate that humans will not wait passively for destruction. Captain Shin Daeho, Chief of Industrial Operations, had been quietly reviewing production schedules during the briefing. Now he looked up with an expression of grim determination. General, if we are committing to total war, I can convert our entire civilian fleet to military support roles within 6 weeks. The transformation he described would involve converting cargo vessels to troop transports, passenger ships to hospital vessels, and industrial platforms to weapons manufacturing facilities. It was the kind of total mobilization that no galactic species had attempted in living memory. How many vessels? Nam asked. Over 1,500 ships of various classes, Shin replied. Most will not be suitable for frontline combat, but they can provide logistic support, reconnaissance, and specialized operations that will free our warships for direct engagement. General Nam walked to the large window that looked out over Seoul's military district. Below him, factories that had been producing consumer goods were already being converted to military production. The entire planet was transforming itself into a weapon of war, something that alien species had never needed to consider. The aliens expect us to behave like a civilized species, he said finally. They expect us to wait for their attack and then conduct a defensive campaign according to their rules of warfare. He turned back to his staff. Instead, we will bring the war to them. We will strike their staging areas, disrupt their supply lines, and target their civilian infrastructure. We will fight the kind of war they have never seen and cannot comprehend. The orders went out within hours. Human fleets that had been assembled for defensive operations suddenly changed course, heading toward targets deep in galactic space. The transformation from a defensive to an offensive posture represented a fundamental shift in human strategy. Engineer Shin Daeho worked around the clock to coordinate the conversion of civilian vessels. Passenger liners became hospital ships. Cargo freighters were fitted with missile launchers and armor plating. Mining platforms became mobile weapons factories. The scale of the operation was unprecedented in galactic history. As reports of human fleet movements reached the Hegemony Council, panic began to spread through the galactic government. The aliens had expected humans to behave predictably, gathering their forces around Earth to wait for the coalition attack. Instead, human ships were appearing throughout galactic space, striking at targets that had been considered completely safe. Councillor Vex called another emergency session, as reports flooded in of attacks on coalition supply bases and communication relays. The humans are not waiting for us to attack them, he announced to the shocked assembly. They are bringing the war to us. The age of ritualized galactic warfare was ending, and humanity was writing the first chapter of a new and terrible kind of conflict. The aliens had wanted to contain the human threat through overwhelming force. Instead, they had created the conditions for a total war that would consume the entire galaxy. The Nexus station hung in space like a mechanical moon, its massive structure serving as the primary staging area for the Coalition fleet. Over 1,500 alien warships from 12 different species surrounded the station in carefully organized formations. Admiral Kyle, promoted after his survival of the first human encounter, stood in the command center watching final preparations for the assault on Earth. All fleet elements report ready for departure, announced his tactical officer, a young Centauri named Slick. The human homeworld will be reached in 72 hours. Kyle nodded. Though his confidence was not what it had been before meeting humans in battle, intelligence reports described increasing human attacks throughout coalition space. Strikes that seemed to target civilian infrastructure and supply lines rather than military targets. It was a kind of warfare that violated every principle of civilized conduct. Maintain defensive perimeters around the station, he ordered. Human reconnaissance vessels have been detected in this system. We cannot afford to be caught unprepared. His words proved prophetic. At that moment, 3 light years away, Commander Ryu Jinseo prepared to lead the most audacious military operation in human history. Her strike force consisted of only 47 vessels, a tiny fraction of the enemy fleet they were about to attack. But size had never been humanity's advantage. All ships, final systems check, she transmitted to her fleet. Remember, we have one chance to get this right. The enemy outnumbers us 30-1, but they do not expect us to attack their main staging area. The human ships engaged their jump drive simultaneously, emerging from hyperspace at point-blank range from the Nexus station. The surprise was complete. Coalition vessels that had been conducting routine patrols suddenly found human warships materializing among them. Weapons already firing, Ryu Jinseo's flagship, the destroyer Busan's Blade, targeted the station's main communication array with its opening salvo. The massive structure, designed to coordinate fleet movements across multiple star systems, exploded in a cascade of sparks and debris. Within seconds, the coalition fleet lost its ability to coordinate their response. Attack pattern Delta, Ryu transmitted. Target their command ships first, then their supply vessels. Ignore the escorts. The human attack plan was based on months of intelligence gathering and analysis of alien fleet structures. Instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, the humans struck at the coalition's ability to function as an organized force. Command vessels, communication relays, and logistics support ships became primary targets. Captain Lee Sung-jin commanded the human cruiser Iron Mountain as it drove deep into the coalition formation. His orders were to reach the station's main reactor complex and destroy it, regardless of cost. Around him, alien vessels fired frantically, but their weapons were designed for prolonged engagements between capital ships. Not the close-quarters chaos that humans had created. Sir, we have heavy damage to the forward sections, reported his damage control officer. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Maintain course, Lee ordered. All power to forward weapons. The Iron Mountain continued its assault run even as alien fire tore through its hull. This was human warfare at its most brutal. Ships that would be considered critically damaged by galactic standards continued fighting until they were completely destroyed. There was no retreat, no attempt to preserve lives for future battles. Admiral Kale watched from the station's command center as his carefully organized fleet dissolved into chaos. Human ships moved through the coalition formation like predators, striking at weak points and disappearing before concentrated fire could destroy them. Worse still, they seemed to adapt their tactics in real time, changing their approach as the battle developed. Order the 3rd battle group to intercept those human destroyers, he commanded. Sir, we have lost contact with the 3rd battle group, his communications officer replied. Their command ship was destroyed 12 minutes ago. The scale of destruction was unlike anything in galactic military history. In less than an hour of fighting, the coalition had lost over 200 vessels. The humans had sacrificed only 15 ships, but those losses had been accepted without hesitation to achieve strategic objectives. Lieutenant Song Myeon piloted her damaged fighter through the debris field surrounding the Nexus station, her mission almost complete. The station's defensive systems had been neutralized, its communication networks destroyed, and its supply facilities crippled. Now only one target remained. This is Lightning 7, she transmitted to her squadron leader, beginning final attack run on the reactor complex. Her fighter had lost its main weapons and most of its armor, but the human military doctrine was clear. Every pilot was expected to complete their mission regardless of personal cost. Song's fighter carried a single nuclear warhead in its internal bay, a weapon that could cripple the massive space station if properly placed. Lightning 7, your ship is too damaged, came the reply from her squadron commander. Abort the attack run. Song ignored the order. Through her cockpit window, she could see the reactor complex's main cooling towers. The station housed over 50,000 coalition personnel, both military and civilian. In the old galaxy, such a target would be considered off-limits, but humanity fought by different rules. For Captain Lee Minho, she whispered, remembering the first human to die in this war. Her fighter struck the reactor complex at maximum velocity. The nuclear warhead detonated at the moment of impact, sending a chain reaction through the station's power grid. Emergency systems failed throughout the massive structure, as power conduits overloaded and backup generators shut down. Admiral Kale felt the deck shake beneath his feet as explosions rippled through the station. Emergency lighting flickered on throughout the command center as main power died. Around him, his staff worked frantically to coordinate damage control, but the extent of the destruction was overwhelming. "Sir, we are losing structural integrity in sections 12 through 37, reported his engineering officer. "The main reactor is offline. We are running on emergency power only." Through the viewports, Kale could see coalition ships fleeing the area in disorder. The carefully planned assault on Earth had been shattered by a force less than 1/20th their size. More importantly, the humans had demonstrated a willingness to target civilian populations and infrastructure, something that no galactic species had done in millennia. Commander Ryu Jinseo observed the destruction from her flagship as human forces began their withdrawal. The mission had exceeded all expectations. Not only had they crippled the coalition fleet, but they had sent a message that would resonate throughout galactic civilization. "All ships, begin jump sequence," she ordered. Mission accomplished. As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind the burning wreckage of the Nexus station, a new reality settled over the galaxy. The age of limited warfare was over. Humanity had shown that they would strike any target and pay any price for victory. The survivors of the coalition fleet limped back to their homeworlds carrying news of the disaster. For the first time in galactic history, a species had waged total war against civilian targets and infrastructure. The concept horrified the galactic community, but it also achieved something that centuries of diplomacy had not: fear. The word human began to carry new meaning throughout galactic civilization. It became synonymous with ruthless efficiency and unlimited warfare. Species that had never known true fear began to experience it when facing the possibility of human attack. In the wreckage of the Nexus station, Admiral Kale struggled to comprehend what had happened. His fleet had possessed superior numbers and technology, yet they had been defeated by an enemy that fought without restraint or mercy. The humans had not just won a battle. They had fundamentally changed the nature of warfare itself. As rescue ships arrived to evacuate survivors from the crippled station, Kale realized that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had introduced concepts of unlimited warfare that would forever alter the balance of power among the stars. The breaking point had been reached, and galactic civilization would have to adapt to a new and terrible reality. 6 months after the destruction of Nexus Station, Ambassador Kale found himself aboard the human space station Unity, a massive structure that had been built in the former Coalition staging area. The irony was not lost on him. Where once the galaxy's greatest military force had assembled to destroy humanity, now stood a monument to human victory. The conference room was designed in human style, with simple furniture and harsh lighting that made Kale uncomfortable. Across the table sat President Huang Jiung of Earth, a middle-aged woman whose calm demeanor concealed the leader of the most feared military force in galactic history. "Ambassador Kale," President Huang began, "I understand you have terms of surrender to present." The words stung, though Kale had expected them. The coalition fleet that was to have destroyed Earth now existed only in scattered remnants. Human forces controlled 12 star systems that had once belonged to various alien species. Most shocking of all, several minor species had actually requested human protection from their former coalition partners. "President Huang, the Hegemony Council has authorized me to negotiate a cessation of hostilities," Kale said carefully. "We are prepared to offer substantial concessions in exchange for an end to human military operations." "Such as?" Huang asked. Kale activated a holographic display that showed star charts of the galaxy, recognition of human sovereignty over all systems you currently occupy, exclusive trading rights in the Outer Rim territories, a permanent seat on the Hegemony Council with full voting rights. President Huang studied the display for a long moment. Around the table, her military advisors waited quietly. Finally, she spoke. "These are generous terms, Ambassador. Unfortunately, they are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of our position. I do not understand. You assume that we want to join your galactic civilization? Huang replied. That we desire integration into your existing power structures. This assumption is incorrect. The president stood and walked to the large window that looked out into space. Human warships could be seen patrolling the area in formations that had become familiar throughout the galaxy. Their dark hulls and weapon-heavy designs created a stark contrast to the elegant curves of traditional alien vessels. 6 months ago, your coalition attacked one of our exploration vessels, she continued. You killed Captain Lee Minho and his crew because they refused to surrender to an authority they had never recognized. That action taught us something important about galactic civilization. She turned back to face Kale directly. Your system is based on the assumption that all species will eventually submit to your authority. You have ruled through superior technology and the threat of overwhelming force, but you made a critical error in your calculations. What error? Kale asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. You assumed that we would behave like every other species you have encountered. You expected us to follow your rules of warfare, to surrender when faced with superior numbers, to value our lives more than our freedom. President Huang returned to her seat. We do not. Admiral Kim Tae-hyun, who had led the first human response to the Velothi attack, spoke for the first time during the meeting. Ambassador, your intelligence files describe humanity as a primitive species that has not yet learned to live in peace. This assessment is correct. We are a species that has spent our entire history fighting for survival. He activated his own holographic display, showing images from human history, battles from ancient times to the recent conflicts that had raged during humanity's expansion into space. Every generation of humans has faced extinction. We have fought ice ages, plagues, famines, and each other. We have never known a time when survival was guaranteed. The images shifted to show human colonies on hostile worlds, space habitats built in asteroid fields, and industrial complexes that operated in the vacuum of space. This experience has taught us something that your species have forgotten. Freedom is not a gift that others can grant or take away. It is something that must be defended with blood and sacrifice. Kyle studied the images with growing understanding. The other species in the galaxy had achieved peace on their homeworlds before reaching space. They had built their civilizations on the assumption that rational beings would choose cooperation over conflict. Humanity had learned a different lesson. What do you want from us? He asked. Nothing, President Huang replied. We do not seek to rule over other species or impose our will on galactic civilization. But we will not be ruled either. Any attempt to force humanity into submission will be met with total warfare until either we are destroyed completely or our enemies are. The room fell silent as the implications of her words settled over the assembled diplomats. The galaxy had spent thousands of years building a system based on compromise and mutual cooperation. Humanity represented something that could not be integrated into this system because they refused to accept any external authority. Dr. Park Sora, now serving as Earth's Director of Interspecies Relations, addressed the alien delegation. Ambassador, we have studied your history and your methods of governance. Your system works well for species that value security over freedom, cooperation over independence, but it cannot accommodate a species like humanity. She stood and walked to another display that showed current galactic political boundaries. Your Hegemony Council governs 47 species across thousands of star systems. You maintain peace through a combination of economic incentives and military deterrence. This system has been successful for 8,000 years. The display changed to show human-controlled space, a small cluster of systems that had been carved out through military conquest. In 6 months, we have demonstrated that your system cannot defend itself against a species willing to wage unlimited warfare. Your fleets are designed to intimidate and control, not to fight against an enemy that accepts no limits on acceptable casualties. Admiral Kim stood and joined Dr. Park at the display. The balance of power in the galaxy has permanently changed. Your species can no longer assume that superior technology and numbers guarantee victory. Any conflict with humanity will be total war, fought without restraint or mercy until one side is completely destroyed. Kale felt a chill as he understood the new reality. The galaxy had been ruled by the implicit threat that resistance would be met with overwhelming force. Humanity had proven that overwhelming force was not enough if the enemy was willing to pay any price for victory. What happens now? He asked. President Huang returned to the star chart display. Now you adapt. Your Hegemony Council can continue to govern the species that accept your authority, but you will not interfere with human expansion or attempt to impose your laws on human territory. She highlighted several star systems on the edge of human space. These systems have already requested human protection from coalition forces. We have agreed to provide it. Other species will likely make similar requests as word spreads about the effectiveness of human military protection. The implications were staggering. If other species began aligning with humanity instead of the coalition, the entire structure of galactic civilization would collapse. The Hegemony Council's authority depended on being the only source of protection and stability in the galaxy. You are describing the end of galactic unity, Kyle protested. No, Admiral Kim replied. We are describing the beginning of galactic choice. For the first time in 8,000 years, species will have an alternative to submission to your authority. They can choose to ally with humanity and accept our protection, or they can remain under coalition control. Dr. Park activated a final display showing communication intercepts from throughout the galaxy. Intelligence reports indicate that several species are already reconsidering their relationship with the coalition. The Rigel Confederacy has withdrawn from joint military operations. The Outer Rim territories have declared neutrality. 3 minor species have formally requested meetings with human representatives. President Huang concluded the meeting with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Ambassador Kale, return to your council with this message. Humanity does not seek war, but we will not avoid it. We do not seek to rule others, but we will not be ruled. Any species that wishes to coexist with us in peace will find us reasonable neighbors. Any species that attempts to force us into submission will discover why. In a galaxy full of intelligent life, no one dares challenge humans in war. As Kale departed the station with his delegation, he carried with him the knowledge that the galaxy would never be the same. The age of enforced unity under coalition rule was ending. In its place would come a new era, where species would have to choose between the security of submission and the dangers of independence. Behind him, human ships continued their patrols of space that had been won through sacrifice and determination. The dark vessels served as permanent reminders that in a universe where most species had forgotten how to fight, humanity remembered every lesson that warfare could teach. The new galactic order had been written in the wreckage of coalition fleets and the sacrifice of human lives. It was an order based not on superior technology or ancient authority, but on the simple truth that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. In his personal log, recorded during the long journey back to coalition space,